Welcome to the History Method and Historiography in this History Help channel. We have already covered the history section. We are now into historical methodology. So, in historical methodology, in last class, we learned about research. Today, we are looking into analytical operations. So, before we come into analytical operation, let us understand what are analytical operations. So, you as a researcher has already selected the topic to write about. You have identified the topic. You have found out the necessary sources, primary sources, secondary sources. You have made a bibliography of all the sources, and you have also made a outline of what you will be writing. So after all this is over, you should start your analytical operations. What does analytical operations mean? It means finding out whether the sources that you have collected is genuine or not. It is to find out whether there is true or whether the source that you have identified as authentic or true or not. Why is this important? This is very important because you are trying to write a historical narrative of the past. So if you get a wrong source, a very false source, then what you write will also be wrong. So it's very important to identify the source as a correct one before you start researching and writing. So that is what analytical operations do. So what there are two types of analytical operations. One is internal criticism, one is external criticism. So the word criticism does not mean finding fault or trying to see every source as critical. Here, criticism in analytical operation, criticism means to analyze the document and to find out if it is genuine or not. It is just to study the source and find out if it is true or not. So, let us find out what is external criticism. That is the that's the first type of analytical operations. So, in external criticism, even before we find out what is external criticism, you may ask, why is a source a wrong one or a false one? Why is it not genuine? See, what happens in history is there are a lot of inscriptions, epigraphy sources, literary sources that talk about land grants, donations given by the ruler or a chieftain. Okay, so these donations are land grants that are given are generally profitable of nature. So maybe if you there will be a copper inscriptions that is talking about a grant, a land grant given to you by a king. Let us take an example that way. So it was the land grant area was only 100 hectares, let us think, or 100 acres. Now, maybe in your greed, you wanted 200 acres. So you can very easily manipulate the inscription to tell that the land grant was given to you for 200 years instead of 100. Or you maybe the land grant was given by the king only for 10-year period, but you want to increase the duration so that the land is always with you. So what you do, you forge the inscription to write 20 years instead of 10 years, or it may be 50 years instead of 10 years. So either due to greed, or even due to jealousy, due to hatred, or due to pride, or due to all these reasons, the source may be wrong one. Um, or let us take another example. If you are a scholar and you are writing about a particular king, you have studied all the research, done all your research, and you realize that you know a lot about that king for the first 50 years. So you write about it, but you do not know the cause of his death or his last years of his life. So instead of saying you don't know, or instead of telling the source is not there, you, because of your own pride, you try to bring out an inscription or an epigraphy saying that he died in the year 15, after 50 years he died, maybe in certain place. You might forge an inscription yourself, falsify an inscription yourself, either literary or epigraphy, and say that, and make the whole story full. So you may be, due to your own pride, you might try to falsify a inscription. So that is why it's important to analyze a document, and that is what analytical operations do. So let us take into look into what is external criticism. External criticism has three operations to do. It has to check out who is the author of the document. Suppose you get a source, who is the author? If there is no author, you have to find out who is the author. When you get to know the author, figure out what is his whether the author is a trustworthy person, what are his intentions. So you should get a general idea who was the author of a particular source. This will give you a fair idea whether the source is genuine or not. The second thing that you will do is find out the place of the source. So for example, let us say some event took place in Delhi, but the place that you got the source is in Karnataka, which is quite far off. That does not mean it is false, but what happens is the relevance of the source will decrease because it's so far away from the event. It might not be a correct version of the events happening in Delhi. So Karnataka is relatively quite far from Delhi. Third is the time period of the source. So suppose an event happened in 3rd century and the source that you have taken is about 17th century. That time also its relevance is greatly reduced. If you had got a source which was talking about the 3rd century event, and that source was 4th century or something, maybe you could have relied on it. But this is, if you have got a 17th century source, it's quite far apart. So these are the three things you check in external criticism: author, place, and time. You're not going more deeper into it. So it is just a small study that you're doing. That is why external criticism is also known as lower criticism. You're not going very deep. What is internal criticism? This is also analytical operations, but it goes a bit deeper into the source. So it has two sections in it: positive interpretative criticism and negative interpretative criticism. So internal criticism is also called as higher criticism because it's going a little bit more deeper, and it is studied in two steps. One is positive and one is negative. So in our next video we will be looking into the internal criticism part in more detail. So thank you, and keep subscribing to this channel.